So I made a vow at the beginning of the year that I would talk about every movie I see this year in a video, and up until this point I have utterly failed to do so. So I decided today to make a video that makes up for all those movies that I've seen this year in theaters. So today, welcome to my review of all 5 movies I've seen in 2019. Also, this is basically just an exact copy of everything I wrote in my reviews on Letterboxd, which, shameless plug, go check those out. Anyway, without further ado, let's get into it. Oh boy, where to start? At the beginning of 2019, this was up there with my most anticipated films of the year. I had just seen Split and absolutely loved it, and Unbreakable was pretty good too, so this was something I was looking forward to a lot. I went and saw it on opening night, first showing at my theater ever, and well, this film wasn't terrible. From a critical standpoint, it was very good for 2 whole acts. The characters were good, the acting was great, the action was great, and I was not bored throughout the entirety of it. After the first 2 acts though, everything just went downhill. M. Night Shyamalan decided to take all the organization and skill he put into the first 2 acts of this film and sacrifice it for a shock ending. Well, he definitely shocked me. Shocked me out of buying a ticket for any of your next few films. The path he decided to go down to end this franchise was nothing short of awful and could have been handled better by almost any director in Hollywood today. As a result, I immediately stormed out of my theater and decided that I hated it. My opinion has lined up a bit, but I still can't believe how this trilogy, after 2 good to even great films, fell flat in the final act. Critically speaking, a term I love to use, this film isn't horrible, but since most people aren't movie critics, they will see this film for what it really is, a disappointment to any fan of the Easterl 177 trilogy. Final score for Glass, 5.0 out of 10. So starting out with what I liked about this movie, there is a lot. I think the best thing here is pretty easily the acting, specifically from our 2 leads Taylor Schilling and Jackson Robert Scott. Jackson Robert Scott is fantastic, and while he won't get any Oscar nominations or anything like that, he definitely deserves some recognition for what he does here. Taylor Schilling is also great for the most part, and she and Jackson Robert Scott have amazing chemistry. In fact, some of the best moments of the film come when both these characters are on screen, so they definitely carried a lot of the load. Other actors like Peter Mooney and Colm Feore, I think, are pretty good and suffice in the roles that they play, albeit coming off as pretty cheesy at times. Next up, Nicholas McCarthy quietly gave us, in my opinion, one of the best directed horror films in recent memory. His use of angles and camera work built up a ton of suspense, even though there weren't a lot of in-your-face scary moments. He kept the plot development at a good pace and kept the film under control at least until the final act, but we'll talk about that later. Finally, this was a really fun film to watch. There were times when it got kind of depressing, the ending, but the rest of the film delivered on what I wanted to see, which from my most anticipated films of 2019 was... I don't really have a ton to say about this, other than that I think it looks really scary, and it will be a ton of fun to watch. So yeah, besides that, there were the little things like the score, which was pretty good, but nothing else really special enough to mention. So The Prodigy had a surprisingly coherent and cognitive plot and was held together exceptionally well up until the final act. But, as previously mentioned, that's when things started to get a little out of hand. I won't spoil anything, but I will say that where Nicholas McCarthy chooses to go with the ending was very predictable and just didn't sit well with me after watching it. It kind of just felt like, really, this is the best they could come up with? And there were just a lot of things that were off about it. Other than that, the coloration of the film was very dull, and other than most of the daytime shots, the majority of the movie was dark and kind of an eyesore, to be completely honest. The shots themselves are fantastic, but what was inside of them was very bland. Also, I hope that Orion Pictures doesn't intend to use this to set up a franchise, because if they continue to produce more films stemming from the ending of this one, they will get considerably worse every time. Don't get me wrong, I really like this movie, but this is pretty obviously a one-time thing. The Prodigy mostly delivered on everything I wanted it to, and I wasn't remotely disappointed with the final product. It was a fun horror movie with some frightening moments, and for die-hard horror fans, this is right up your alley. For a casual moviegoer, I would still probably recommend it too. After thinking it over, I'd give this film a 7.9 out of 10, and as far as if you should see it, I'd wait till it hits dollar theaters. 5 years after we got the animated masterpiece The Lego Movie, it's time to get a sequel, after of course 2 other spin-offs and a cinematic universe. So now it's time to sit down and give my serious thoughts on a kids movie based off of a toy product. Without being too elaborate, I thought it was really good. Not great, and not as good as the first, but good. If you are a lover of kids' movies and refuse to believe that you have matured yet, I definitely recommend it, especially if you loved the first one like I did. As a film, it is critically one of the best I've seen this year. The animation is once again beautiful, and its unique CGI stop motion holds up against the other films in the genre. The talented voice cast returns to give the characters life again, and we get a few new fun additions to the crew like Tiffany Haddish and Stephanie Beatriz. The story focuses more on Wildstyle rather than Emmett this time around, and it leads to some very interesting character development that you wouldn't think a sequel would bring. Also, the story managed to stay unpredictable. I thought I had it all figured out about halfway through the film, but Lord and Miller reminded me in the third act that this wasn't just any ordinary animated film with a twist that wasn't anything special but still surprised me. On the negative side of things, this film wasn't as fun or as vibrant as the first one. Although it had notably more musical numbers, not something I was necessarily a huge fan of. It's colorful, yes, but I don't feel as good watching it if that makes any sense at all. To go along with that, the added character development for Emmett and Wildstyle take away from all the other characters, which leads to a very one-sided character affair. Overall, the Lego Movie, the second part, manages to stay fun and exciting, but as a whole, it just feels less fresh and reinvigorating as the first one was. I try not to penalize it too much though, because it's likely that no version of this film could be released that would be as good as the first. If you're looking for a fun time where you can turn off your brain and watch a kids movie, which we all need sometimes, then this is definitely something I would recommend. Final score for the Lego Movie, the second part, 8.3 out of 10. So, I've been anticipating this film for a long time. Just to give you an idea of the dysfunctional atmosphere of Alita Battle Angel, the first trailer I saw for it was at a January showing of Star Wars The Last Jedi, almost a year and a half ago. Yet for some reason I went and saw it. Needless to say, it wasn't great. The experience itself was fun, but the film, not so much. The acting was pretty good from the main leads, but nothing worth writing home about. The visual effects stand out among everything else though, and are some of the best I've seen in a while. Other than that, there was nothing very good about this movie at all. On the negative side, it was ironically one of the blandest films I've seen in a while. The irony lying in the fact that despite it being an extremely colorful and great looking film, I can't remember much about it at all. I know the main character's name is Alita, she has a boyfriend named Hugo, Mahershala Ali is the bad guy, and that's about all. Besides that, I can remember that it was a mess. The plot was all over the place, I don't even remember half of it, and it seemed like James Cameron and Robert Rodriguez had no clue what they were doing. They just wrote down ideas, built on them about as well as a middle schooler could, and then spent millions of dollars on it. All in all, I don't hate this film. It's hard to hate something that you can't remember half of. That being said, I have to acknowledge the fact that this is a big jumbled up mess. Unless you're a 12-year-old girl having a sleepover without Netflix, then I suggest you spend your hard-earned money somewhere else. Final score for Alita Battle Angel, 4.3 out of 10. Finally, a film that knows how to properly end a trilogy in 2019. M. Night Shyamalan, take note. All not so subtle shots of other films aside, How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World is a phenomenal film. Though it has some very tough competition, I do believe that this is the best in the franchise and is the perfect ending it deserved. To talk more specifically about what I love so much about this film, I'll start with the animation. This is, without a doubt, the best looking animated film I have ever seen. It takes the beautiful water graphics of The Good Dinosaur and combines it with stellar character animations and breathtaking sky effects to produce something that makes Alita Battle Angel look like a home movie. The voice cast from the previous two films returns and does a great job without having any big name actors. The underlying themes of the film were also great, with the main idea being the difficulties of letting go. The pacing in the movie was also great, as it felt like a smooth ride rather than the bumpy roller coaster other films this year have turned out to be. This film also took a little bit of a Logan approach by focusing more on our characters in their final rodeo rather than the plot going on around them, which makes Grimald, the villain, better as a somewhat grounded antagonist instead of some world-ending supervillain. This approach also makes the ending more enjoyable as we finish out the series with our main characters in the way all franchises should. Moving on to the negative side of things, I really don't have much to say at all. The dialogue at the beginning got very cheesy at times and sometimes even bordered on cringeworthy, but never got to the point where it was a huge problem. Other than this, the film was a tad bit predictable, but whenever it is made evident by advertising that this is the last film in the franchise, that's just something you have to deal with. Overall, How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World is better than, almost, any animated film that came out in 2018, and I wouldn't be surprised if it remains in my top 10 at the end of the year. Final score for How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World, 9.6 out of 10. Thanks so much for watching, guys. That's all from me. If you want to see more movie-related content like this, then click the subscribe button down below or in the outro. Thanks so much for watching. Always remember to keep God number one. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.